The Luigi's Mansion series is one of Nintendo's most unique and charming series, but are these games really as good as everyone says, or have they been overrated? Let's take a look at the whole series to get an answer to this. Luigi's Mansion launching alongside the GameCube felt like a fever dream. This was supposed to be Nintendo's big comeback after the N64 started losing ground to PlayStation. Every Nintendo console launch up until this point had a Mario game, whether it was Super Mario Bros. On the NES, Super Mario World on the SNES, or Super Mario 64 on the Nintendo 64. You could always expect to see Mario when that console launched. But things were a little bit different for the GameCube. They decided to go with Green Mario here. The premise is very simple here. Luigi wins a mansion from a contest he didn't enter, and goes looking for his brother who may or may not actually be there. Luigi shows up expecting Mario, finds a dark building that feels like it's watching him, and Professor Egad materializes out of nowhere to explain that ghosts have taken over and Luigi is apparently the guy for this. Luigi already looks ready to pass out, so great hire by Egad, but his personality is part of the charm here. Now, I didn't play this at launch, I wasn't even alive when it came out. My first time playing this was years later at a friend's house on the Wii through backwards compatibility. Even removed from all the hype of this, I really got into Luigi's Mansion. The game felt different than any other Mario game I'd ever played, and it was cool having the focus be on Luigi instead of Mario like every other game. So the original commits to a single location in a way most games wouldn't dare to do. There's no hub world, there's no sudden beach level where Luigi goes surfing halfway through. You're just in this mansion and you're staying there. Kind of gives the game a cohesion that the sequels deliberately walk away from. The mansion is divided into areas, but those divisions feel natural. You unlock new wings by defeating Portrait Ghost and earning keys, which means you're constantly looping back through the same hallways as they open up. Because of that looping, the layout feels familiar in a way that actually matters to how the game feels. You start recognizing rooms the way you recognize your own house in the dark, not by thinking about it, just by knowing from familiarity. Early on, every door creak feels like a threat, and by the time you're in the later areas, you're just jogging through without a care in the world, humming along with Luigi. And then the mansion starts to lose some of its power over you. You're not as scared anymore as you get more used to it. That shift is totally intentional too. As you clear a room and the lights come on, it's like you're reclaiming that space, and the mansion brightens up as you go. It's a very simple idea that doesn't seem important, but it really does add to this. For a game now almost 25 years old, Luigi's Mansion still nails its mood in a way that the sequels just haven't, in my opinion. The GameCube hardware was clearly being pushed, but not in the expected direction. Instead of cramming 1,000 objects on screen, they focused almost entirely on lighting and shadow. No, not that shadow. And Luigi has this trusty flashlight here, which can illuminate rooms and also find things hidden in the dark. The music does as much heavy lifting as anything visual. When Luigi's at full health, he hums the main theme to himself quietly, but as his health drops, that humming starts coming apart, start to miss notes, his voice cracks, and by the time you're running on empty, Luigi sounds as bad as this guy. So one of my favorite details in any Nintendo game, the game doesn't even really need cutscenes to tell you how scared he is. You can just hear it in his voice. There's also randomly a button dedicated entirely to calling out Mario's name. It serves no mechanical purpose, it doesn't unlock anything or move the plot forward. It's just there so Luigi can shout into an empty mansion and hear his own voice come back. The Game Boy Horror, the scanner device EGAD gives you, adds another layer of personality through Luigi's observations about the paintings and furniture scattered throughout. And again, this doesn't push the plot forward or anything, but it's just a nice detail. And then there's the silence, long stretches where nothing happens, there's no jump scares, no music to tell you anything's coming, just Luigi's footsteps. The core mechanic is simple. Shine a flashlight to stun ghosts, then vacuum them up with the Poltergust 3000. Once stunned, ghosts fight back, you're pulling against their movement and trying to drain their HP before they wiggle free. Landing a full capture and one clean pull feels satisfying in a very specific way. It's like parallel parking on the first try when no one's watching. The controls use the, at the time, brand new C-stick for aiming, which by modern standards feels awkward. Adjusting your angle while maintaining the suction of the vacuum requires practice, and occasionally ghosts slip away in a way that feels like the controller's fault, but the game rarely overwhelms you with chaotic encounters because the rooms are small and fights are very controlled. What the game doesn't tell you but rewards you for figuring out is that the amount of HP you drain in a single unbroken pull affects how much treasure drops from that ghost. If you master your positioning and timing and drain a high HP ghost in one go, the room pays out noticeably better. This is one thing that the game never explains, but just incentivizes getting better. The money system feeds into this because every coin, bill, gold bar, gem, and pearl goes towards your final mansion ranking, which is the reward you see at the end of the game. Even pulling curtains or spinning a chandelier releases hidden valuables, so you're just constantly scanning rooms for anything that might react. It really motivates you to check every corner of every room, whether it's looking under a rug, opening a drawer, shaking a table. It adds a lot more depth without feeling like filler. So as you move through the mansion's 4 areas, the Poltergust picks up elemental abilities. Fire, water, and ice ghosts can be captured then used to solve environmental puzzles. Ice melts flames, blocking your path. Fire lights candles and burns plants. Water extinguishes hazards. Now these aren't complicated in the way a Zelda dungeon system is complicated, but it does add some more variety here. Once the knowledge novelty of vacuum curtains wears off, and it does after a while, I won't pretend otherwise, but the portrait ghosts are what actually gives the game its identity. Instead of just being generic ghosts to suck up, they have routines and personalities, and a sense that they were doing something before you walked in and interrupted them. Neville is in a study reading, Lydia is doing her makeup, there's a dancing couple endlessly waltzing in the ballroom, Biff Atlas is flexing in a workout room that clearly hasn't seen a living person in years. Each portrait ghost also fights differently. There's 23 of them total, and some throw objects, some summon smaller ghosts to wear you down first, some require specific lighting setups before they'll even show their health bar, and once captured they become paintings in Egad's gallery. You can watch them accumulate as you progress, which gives you a sense of restoring order rather than just clearing enemies. Elemental ghost type tie into the poltergeist upgrades in a very purposeful way that does not feel arbitrary. The major area boss fights are elevated versions of portrait encounters built around the room they live in. The baby in the nursery grows to enormous size and attacks with rocking horses. The dancing couple requires you to expose them both to light simultaneously. Now these fights aren't brutally difficult or anything, but they're more memorable because the environment is part of the fight. Whether it's furniture getting involved, lighting shifts, music changes, the game takes advantage of the GameCube's much improved hardware to make it a lot more theatrical. The mansion does build in difficulty naturally as you go, and by the later areas you're moving through spaces that would have felt overwhelming at the start, and there aren't many upgrades in this game. It's really just you getting better at the game. With that being said, the final confrontation with King Boo is in my opinion disappointing, and I say that as someone who genuinely loves this game. He spends the whole campaign being theatrical and taunting, clearly enjoying every second of having Luigi in his house. Like, I mean, who wouldn't enjoy having Luigi in his house? Then you reach him and he's inhabiting a Bowser shell. Yes, a Bowser shell. You spend most of the fight dodging fire and throwing spike balls at a fake Bowser head, and the hit detection gets inconsistent in a way that made me, on one specific occasion, just put down my controller out of frustration. It's like spending an entire movie building up to the villain, only for the final fight to be against his car. After such a tight campaign, it just sticks out pretty badly. The satisfaction of beating King Boo comes from completing the journey and rescuing Mario, not really from the fight itself. A first playthrough of this game is not going to take long, like it can take you 6 to 7 hours or so, which is short by any Nintendo game standard. The game was built with replayability in mind though. Your final money total determines which mansion Luigi ends up with at the end, and it's not just big versus small, there's several tiers based on your exact total, ranging from a literal shack all the way up to a massive estate, with a few stops in between. Most players never find the secret treasure rooms hidden throughout the mansion, and there are several of them, and this is really a great incentive to replay, because if you care about unlocking the better mansions, you're gonna need to find some of these. There's hidden mansion mode unlocked after finishing the game, which remixes the difficulty, and the European version of this, which I haven't played, goes further by completely mirroring the mansion layout, making bosses harder and cutting health recovery options significantly. And why this was region exclusive for years, I don't know, but I always like when Nintendo games have things like this. The short runtime is a real criticism, because like 5 or 6 hours or so is pretty brief. It was never trying to be like a 20-hour big adventure, but I feel like making this game a little longer wouldn't have hurt. So looking at what Luigi's Mansion did, it was a very unique game that changed up expectations for Nintendo launch titles, gave Luigi his personality that we still think of today, where he's very timid and dramatic, because before this, he didn't really have much of a personality besides being Mario's brother. Luigi's Mansion is far from a perfect game, but it's absolutely worth playing if you have Nintendo Switch Online or the original disc, or even the 3DS remake that I will get to later in the video, because like I said, it is a quick adventure, and more than likely you're going to have a lot of fun with it. And one more thing I'll say about this game, while it said sequels expand on some of its features, I feel like neither of them have actually replicated the true scary atmosphere of this game and have went in a more lighthearted direction. If you're enjoying this video so far, I just want to say subscribe and comment what you want to see in Luigi's Mansion 4. For over a decade, Luigi's Mansion felt like a one-time experiment. It launched on the GameCube and was fairly popular for its time, but then we got nothing on the Wii, which would have felt like a perfect console for it, and no one was really expecting a sequel. But then Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, or Luigi's Mansion 2, depending on where you are, was announced for the 3DS in 2013. Felt very surreal because Nintendo was digging up something niche and transplanting it to a handheld, which seemed like a strange call for a series built almost entirely around atmospheric lighting and the feeling of being alone in a dark space. On a tiny screen, it seemed like it just wouldn't hit the same. Now if we go back to 2013, remember this was the year of Luigi, so it makes sense they would want to make a sequel to Luigi's one solo adventure he had. Well, maybe not his only solo adventure. So I was really hyped for this game, and even got this Luigi's Mansion plushie from the Nintendo store, so I had pretty high expectations for this. At first, playing it on the 3DS felt odd, cause the original had such a specific console identity, but the mission structure made sense for the device pretty quickly. You do a mission, close the system, pick it up again tomorrow. Scarescraper, which was the multiplayer mode, became one of my favorite experiences that I'd play with friends back in the day, and the game still had a lot of that Luigi's Mansion charm. Besides the missions, which I will get to soon, the biggest structural change was obvious, and instead of one mansion, you get 5, the Gloomy Manor, Haunted Towers, Old Clockwork, Secret Mine, and Treacherous Mansion. That sounds cool on paper, like a straight upgrade. More themes, more variety, more way to change things up. And in a lot of ways, it delivers on that. Gloomy Manor eases you in with a familiar haunted house. You have creaking wood, dusty corridors, flickering lights. It feels like your standard scary mansion, but almost immediately the game signals it isn't going to stay grounded. Haunted Towers goes full overground greenhouse with plant-based hazards, vertical exploration, and a layout that feels more alive and organic than anything in the original. Old Clockworks is one of my favorites. It's an industrial factory full of gears, conveyor belts, and moving platforms, where timing and spatial awareness matters more than anywhere else in the game. It uses environmental manipulation a lot more here as a mechanic, and in my opinion, it is the creative peak of Dark Moon. Then there's Secret Mine, which brings ice physics that affect how Luigi moves and fights, like minecart sections like they're trying to be Resident Evil 4. Treacherous Mansion closes things out by blending museum exhibits into the layout, with shifting walls and artifacts that become part of puzzles in ways that feel more open-ended than earlier missions. The variety genuinely impresses me here. You're never in one theme long enough to get tired of it, but the trade-off is that these locations sometimes feel like well-designed themed levels rather than actual places. The original mansion had that consistency. It had rooms connected in ways that made architectural sense, and you felt like the building existed independently of you being in it. Dark Moon's 5 locations are creative and often pretty striking for a 3DS game, but you don't have the same quality. You're moving through haunted scenarios rather than inhabiting a haunted space, and that distinction ends up mattering more than it sounds like it should. So besides having different mansions, there's the mission structure here, which is much different than the original, and it is incredibly divisive. And the frustrating thing is that both sides of the argument are right in a lot of ways. Everything is broken into discrete missions with clear objectives, a ranking system, and a forced return to EGAD's lab when you finish. For a handheld game where sessions might be short, it does make sense. You can revisit specific missions to improve your rank, you can hunt boos or find gems you missed without redoing the whole game. It does keep things manageable here, but it constantly breaks the atmosphere too, which was arguably the best part of the original. You start getting comfortable in a mansion, you're exploring a corner properly, following something that caught your interest, and then the mission ends and you're yanked back to the lab whether you want to leave or not. The slow drift of the original, where you could spend as long as you wanted in a room just poking at things, is essentially gone here. EGAD compounds this by calling you constantly through the dual screen. This game's equivalent of the original Game Boy horror device. He checks in, reminds you of objectives, and comments on what you're doing. In the original, EGAD explains the basics and then largely leaves you alone with the mansion. Here, he's never more than a few minutes away from interrupting you to tell you something you probably already knew. Speaking of EGAD here, he gives you the Poltergust 5000, which is a clear upgrade in almost every way. It's more responsive, the suction feels smoother. The strobe bulb replaces the original's instant flashlight flash with a charge mechanic. You have to hold it before releasing, which adds a timing layer that makes encounters feel slightly more deliberate. The dark light device is the major new addition. It reveals invisible objects that Ghost have hidden, which becomes central to puzzles and collectible hunting throughout the game. Scanning rooms with it does slow things down, but it also adds a layer of environmental depth that the original didn't have. Overall, ghost hunting feels more fluid and action forward. Luigi's animations still sell his fear, but the gameplay underneath doesn't reflect the same hesitation anymore. The art style is also very different here. While the original had a very distinct style, this has a much plainer one that definitely does affect the vibe of it. Another genuine loss from the original is the portrait ghost. Instead of distinct personalities with routines and implied backstories, most major bosses here are possessors, ghosts that inhabit objects and animate them into set-piece encounters. Whether it's a giant spider that drops from the greenhouse ceiling or a staircase coming to life and chasing you. These are visually impressive for a 3DS game and creatively designed, but they just don't have the same personalities. They feel like threats to overcome rather than characters to encounter. One character that does shine here is Polterpup. He's a ghost dog recurring throughout the whole campaign, sometimes stealing things you need and sometimes leading you somewhere useful. He's really the only new character in Dark Moon that really stands out to me. Maybe it's just because I like dogs, but how can you not like this guy? King Boo is also back here, and his role is handled better here than in the original. The Dark Moon shards serve as a constant reminder of his influence throughout, and the final confrontation is more dynamic than the GameCube version. Still not the best in the series, but considerably less awkward than the original. So what about the collectibles and replayability? Well, that is a positive here because Dark Moon expands the collectibles system significantly, and finding them requires dark light use, environmental experimentation, and revisiting missions you've already completed. There's 32 boos total spread across 5 mansions, hidden in specific mission segments rather than wandering freely like the original's version. You'll often hear a boo's distinctive laugh echoing through a room before you find it, and that really is a nice touch. The mission ranking system pushes you to optimize runs. You're graded on money collected, damage taken, and time, and it makes replaying individual missions feel purposeful rather than tedious. Now again, I don't like it as much as the original structure, but I don't think it's the worst thing ever like some people act like it is. And besides the main campaign, of course we gotta talk about the Scare Scraper. Puts up to 4 players in randomly arranged floors with timed objectives. We gotta clear all the ghosts, rescue trapped toads, and take down specific targets before the clock runs out. Reviving a teammate requires vacuuming them back to consciousness. On 3DS in local multiplayer, this was one of my favorite things to play as a kid. You feel a lot of pressure when you're playing this because you want to do the best you can, and you want to try to finish all the floors that you set it to. There was one summer where me and my friends were at LEGO camp, and we just brought our 3DSs every day, so during lunch we would just play Scare Scraper every single day, and I have a lot of great memories with this game. Dark Moon does do some things better than the original. It has better controls, it has faster combat, it has some more ambitious boss encounters, but trades a lot of that for atmosphere, where the game just feels disconnected and loses a lot of the eeriness of the original. I still do like this game, but I understand understand why it's very divisive. Before Luigi's Mansion 3 was announced, Nintendo made a decision I still find puzzling. Instead of porting the original GameCube game to the Switch, where people actually would have seen it, they released a full ground-up remake on the 3DS in 2018, built in the Dark Moon engine, rebuilt from scratch. And here's the thing, the Switch had been out for over a year, the 3DS was visibly on its way out, winding things down on the handheld. Releasing the remake there, while the Switch was thriving, just felt very jarring, but the 3DS was arguably less powerful than the GameCube, and again, it was at the end of the 3DS's life cycle. For some reason, Nintendo did this with other games. They released both Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story in 2017 and 2019 respectively, and the sales were hit hard. So besides that being an extremely questionable decision, what is actually different here? So the most immediate difference is the controls. With a new 3DS or Circle Pad, the Poltergust uses dual stick aiming, which eliminates most of the original C-stick awkwardness. Ghost captures feel cleaner and more responsive right away, and the strobe bulb from Dark Moon replaces the instant flashlight stun with a charge mechanic. 100 HP Ghost here can now be worked through in roughly half the time, but those changes do soften something, because the original felt fragile in a way that was actually part of its identity. Every capture just felt right, like you were just barely keeping the ghost from escaping, and the remake makes Luigi notably more capable from the start. Visually, the mansion is rebuilt with updated textures and models, and character animations benefit from the engine improvements, but the hardware ceiling is hard to miss. The GameCube version's lighting was really remarkable for the time, and made the rooms feel more oppressive. The 3DS version is brighter and cleaner, and like with Dark Moon, it makes sense for the handheld screen, but it just loses some of its edge here. There are other new additions here. Luigi shows up as a co-op option, letting a second player join locally. It works and it's fun in short bursts, but it requires 2 3DS systems and 2 copies of the game, which is a barrier that meant most people never touched it because most people already didn't have 1 copy of this. The mansion also wasn't designed with 2 players in mind, so puzzles don't change in interesting ways to accommodate the extra player. It's more of a bonus mode rather than something that reshapes how you actually approach the game. Hidden Mansion mode returns, and North America finally gets the fully mirrored layout that was previously exclusive to European and Australian versions. That's one of the best additions here, because it changes room orientation and adjusts ghost behavior enough that a second playthrough feels much more different. Boss Rush mode lets you fight portrait ghosts back to back, and that's another nice option for testing skills or revisiting favorites without replaying everything. One small mechanical change worth knowing is that the elemental metal system, which is how you access the fire, water, and ice abilities, work differently here. It's reassigned to fit the 3DS button layout. It's a minor adjustment, but if you're coming straight from the GameCube version, your muscle memory will briefly betray you. Up until last year, the 3DS remake was technically the most accessible version of the original, and it does some of what a remake would do, but it's generally hard not to spend the whole time thinking about what could have been if this was on the Switch. It would have had better lighting, it would have gotten a lot more support, it could have had more online co-op, people actually would have known that it existed. It doesn't hurt as much anymore since the original Luigi's Mansion is now on NSO on Switch 2, but I still think it would have been cool to get a remake on the Switch. Only around a year after the Luigi's Mansion remake, we got Luigi's Mansion 3, and this changed a lot. The opening cutscene makes that clear immediately. The characters move with an expressiveness that earns comparisons to animated films, not because it looks photorealistic, but because every subtle reaction and a bit of physical comedy is timed and performed with real craft. Luigi bounces excitedly in a hotel lobby that feels warm and alive, with staff moving around, and details that make you forget what series you're in. When the lights cut overnight and everything goes wrong, you know you're in for something big. Both Luigi's Mansion games before this tried different things. The original had 1 cohesive mansion, the second had 5 different mansions, and I feel like Luigi's Mansion 3 did a good job combining both of those in a way. It's one single hotel, but each floor is radically different, almost like it's its own mansion, like in Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. You're always climbing one vertical structure towards one goal, and your goal is to rescue everyone. Every time you get a new button from a boss fight, you insert it into the elevator and move up, and the loop is very clear here, and feels a lot more satisfying than just going to a new mansion, because it feels like you're genuinely climbing to the top, which I mean, you're literally doing that here. The Poltergust is back here, and this time it's the G00, and it's the best vacuum that's in the series. You're encouraged to test every draw, current and vending machine, every piece of furniture, because something almost always happens. Even when nothing important is hiding, tearing a room apart is just satisfying on its own. The slam becomes fully central here. Once you latch onto a ghost, you can chain slams, smashing it into the floor repeatedly, swinging into other ghosts nearby, chaining captures together, and even with all this, Luigi still looks terrified at the time, which is hilarious. The burst is a new move that clears space instantly, and it's a quick shockwave that knocks back everything nearby. It fixes a problem that previous games had, which is when you get surrounded, it usually means guaranteed damage and an awkward attempt to readjust. It also doubles as a small jump for traversal gaps. The suction shot fires a plunger at objects and lets you physically yank them, which turns environments into something destructible and more reactive. The exploration here just feels a lot better. Back from the remake is Luigi, who's a lot more central here than in the remake. He can slip through grates, walk on spikes, squeeze through bars, and you can swap between him and Luigi to solve puzzles. It's well designed, and in co-op with a second player, it can be pretty fun. Unlike the remake, which was really designed for one player and kind of shoehorned this in, Luigi is used pretty often in Luigi's Mansion 3. So all of that is great, but what about the actual floors here? Nintendo really did a lot of creative things with them, because none of them feel the same. One of my favorites, Paranormal Productions, is a film studio, and it might just be the best level in the series. You walk through film sets that look obviously fake, with cardboard props, painted backdrops, some that's clearly a light bulb. Then you find cameras on stands around the studio, and if you look through one of these cardboard sets, they become real environments. A painted pyramid becomes terrain you can climb, a cardboard sun becomes actual light that solves puzzles. Luigi gets cast in stage film sequences, and you're solving puzzles by manipulating cinematic illusion. Every single puzzle reinforces the filmmaking theme, and nothing in that floor feels arbitrary. The tomb floor, of course, is a full desert theme, and also asks the question of how did they even get this in a hotel? One of my favorites is the magic one, which just messes with your head and kind of feels like a maze. There's a ton of floors here, and it's clear the developers had a lot of fun with trying out different ideas in each one. I haven't asked the question though of why are we actually in this haunted hotel? And it's because of the villain here who actually has a presence. In the original, King Boo is the villain and a story, and Dark Moon, also King Boo, doing essentially the same thing again. Here, Helen Gravely owns the Last Resort Hotel. She orchestrated the trap and reacts to you throughout the entire game via security monitors. Her obsession with King Boo reframes him too. She freed him from EGAD's containment because she idolizes him. The hotel was built specifically to trap Luigi and present him to King Boo as a gift. And while the story here is nothing special, I do think it's the best in the series. And speaking of Helen Gravely, I gotta talk about Polterkitty. She's her ghost cat, and she steals your elevator buttons after boss fights and forces you to chase her through already cleared floors to get them back. So in case you haven't played Luigi's Mansion 3 for some reason and don't want to hear about the final boss fight, just skip to this timestamp on screen. I think this is the best version of King Boo the series has done. You're on the rooftop of the Last Resort, which is obviously the highest point in the game. With the entire hotel, you spend hours climbing visible below you. King Boo clones himself and attacks from multiple angles with projectiles and tongue grabs, and the tongue grabs read his tells and punish you for not dodging. You can't just hold steady and wait for his openings. You need to grab the spike balls he throws and launch them back at him to break his defense before you get the vacuum on him. It feels like everything you learned along the way is coming back here to beat him. So with Luigi's Mansion being a series that wants you to find collectibles and replay it, how is it here? Well, there is ranking here, but it isn't central. Like, you're not replaying a 15-hour game to get a slightly grander conclusion. Collectibles become completionist goals instead, things to pursue because you enjoy the hunt. There's 102 gems across all the floors. Some of them are hidden pretty well, and I found in my first playthrough, and others feel like you just have to stumble upon them. This is the longest Luigi's Mansion game, so it's not as replayable as something like the original where you could beat it in 5 hours or so, but I could definitely see someone wanting to replay this a little bit after, to really try and find all the collectibles, while you already know most of the puzzles, so it won't take as long anyway. And lastly, Scraper does return here, and it has functional online matchmaking. There's also Scream Park, which adds local competitive minigames that are good for a group, but not the main reason to be here. Scraper is fine here. It is polished, it is fun, but doesn't feel like it really did anything new, and I didn't play it too much personally. And now on to the most recent game in the series, which is just a remake. Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is Dark Moon on the Switch, and that's really all it is. There's not really many differences here. It's basically just an HD remaster of the original. Of course, being a Switch game instead of a 3DS game, it has better lighting, it has cleaner character models, ghost animations look a lot better here. If you put it next to Luigi's Mansion 3, visually it looks almost identical. However, it still has that handheld feel to it. The structure is unchanged and the mission system is intact. EGAD is calling you constantly, the pacing is still chopped into segments. On Switch, where Luigi's Mansion 3 already showed how fluid the series could be when the mission structure was gone, the interruptions feel a lot more dated. There really isn't much to say here. If you like the original, you'll like this. If you haven't played it yet, this is the version I definitely would recommend. Did this need to happen? I don't hate it just because it is not a game that was playable on the Switch, and I don't mind seeing HD remasters or remakes of 3DS games. But I feel like more could have been done here to justify the $60 price tag. The best argument for Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, if you already played the original, is probably Scraper if you enjoyed that. The Switch's player base and connectivity makes online runs more accessible than they ever were on the 3DS. It's of course much easier to find people and easier to get into games. Playing it years after Luigi's Mansion 3, I still do enjoy it, but Luigi's Mansion 3 is a much better game, and really makes me hope that we're going to see Luigi's Mansion 4 soon. So looking at the series together, there hasn't been a bad game in it in my opinion. Each game makes specific trades and none of them feel accidental. The original was experimental and restrained. One location, one tool, one goal, there's nothing wasted here. It has a short runtime, it's very compact, and the control scheme does keep encounters small and manageable. It's definitely the most cohesive entry because it never tries to be anything other than exactly what it is. Dark Moon trades a lot of that atmospheric immersion for structure and variety. The 5 locations, the mission-based structure, and the multiplayer is a real feature rather than an afterthought. It's a little more polished mechanically and works for what it is, but it did lose a lot of what made the original so great. And then Luigi's Mansion 3, combining the best aspects of above the previous two games. It just feels like the culmination of this series. It's really better in every way in my opinion, except for the atmosphere. While I do like it here, I like the visuals, I like the animations, I like the music, it doesn't feel eerie like the original did. It feels a lot sillier here and lighthearted, when the original genuinely felt like it had horror elements. While the series has had changes, I feel like it's never truly lost its identity. It shifted, sure, but I don't think anything here is low quality at all. So to answer the question of are the Luigi's Mansion games that good, I would say yes, with caveats. It all depends on personal preference, but there's so many creative ideas here, and they are genuinely satisfying games to play. The last brand new Luigi's Mansion game, not counting remakes, came out in 2019, so it's been 7 years, and I've been seeing rumors about a Luigi's Mansion 4, so let me know, do you think we're gonna see that soon? And if so, what would you like Nintendo to do with it? Do you want to see it maybe take place in an amusement park, in one mansion? Let me know, and be sure to subscribe.